So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna give some couple of minutes for each of our panelists to present themselves, a brief introduction, and kind of like share with us what are their thoughts and their expectation for this session. And while we don't start with Vonshe, please.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Juan Pablo. Thank you, Meg, for having me. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. I have the pleasure of leading Bank of America's supplier diversity and responsible sourcing work, and I've been leading this work for close to 4 years. I've been with the firm 25 years in a number of roles, roles in supply chain, in finance, and corporate real estate, and several of our other operations across the enterprise. I'm currently located in Plano, Texas. And for those of you who are not familiar with North Dallas, it's a suburb right outside of Dallas. And again, I'm happy to be here. Oh, and I think, Juan Pablo, you also asked about the expectations that we have from our time together today. You know, for me, I think it's just great when practitioners can come together and have real discussion around what's happening in their programs, identifying opportunities to leverage each other's best practices, and really talk about the things that are happening in the industry, things that are coming in the future and that we need to be prepared for. So, you know, hopefully, you know, we get a lot of folks who are going to participate in the convo.
Thank you, Vonshe. What about LaMecia, please?
First, I just want to say thank you to Meg and Juan Pablo for having us. I'm really excited about this conversation today and to talk to you about Meta. My name is LaMecia Butler. My pronouns are she and her. I am a supplier diversity manager for the program manager for Meta, and we are a global team. I'll talk a little bit more about that. I am currently based in Houston, Texas, so Vonshe, we are just down the road a few hours from each other. Pre-pandemic, I was actually based in our Austin office. I've had a number of roles in the economic development space. So I've worked both on the philanthropic side, where I was working with social enterprises. I even at one point was the director of the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund here in Houston. But even prior to joining Meta, I had experience in supplier diversity where I was actually a manager of community relations for Super Bowl 50, where we ran the NFL's Business Connect program, which is their supplier diversity program. And then I also was the director of community relations for Super Bowl LI in Houston. So managed the Business Connect, which was the supplier diversity program then. So I've had a couple of years of experience in supplier diversity before joining Meta. I've now been with the Meta supplier diversity team for over 4 years. I started as a contractor, which we call our contingent workers. And then after a year and some change, then I transitioned to a full-time position. It's been a really great thing. And for me, the most thing I enjoy the most is suppliers. And I've actually had supplier conversations today. So that has definitely energized me. And so my expectation today really for this panel and for you is that I want to inspire you to continue to do the work that you are already considering, and then also give you the answers to any questions that you may have to help you on your journey. I will be candid and share whatever you need to help you make the best decisions so that you can continue this work and help us in this impacting space.
Thank you, LaMecia. Can we go please with you now?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. My name is Vang Goldbeck. I'm the Strategic Performance Manager at the City of Des Moines. I'm located right here in City Hall right now, so very close to most of you, I think. My job at the city really is just to do a series of a variety of special projects across the organization. And so one of those initiatives has been to really think about our procurement work and reform it in a way that makes it easy to do, easy to for vendors to participate in, but then also really embed diversity, equity, and sustainability into our operations. So I'm excited to talk to you all a little bit about what we're doing here at the City of Des Moines. We're fairly new to this, and so I think some of my other colleagues here or panelists here have a little bit more experience, but I'm happy to share what we're discovering and how we're looking at this work.
Thank you, Pei. Thank you to all our panelists for their introduction. Now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna officially kick off this panel, and we're gonna start with Vonshe again. And you all have like 10 to 15 minutes to share with us your insight, and after that we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go our Q&A time. So please, Vonshe, you have the floor.
No. Thank you, I appreciate that. And please feel free to keep me on track and to my time, because I can talk about this for a very long time. So I don't have slides for you all today, but I think that's okay. I think I'm gonna really pretty much tell a story over the life of our program, and we can just consider this a fireside coffee chat. But Bank of America started our supplier diversity program in 1990 with our then CEO, Hugh McCall, who started the program with a pretty clear mandate. And that mandate was that we were going to spend 10% of our supply chain dollars with minority-owned and women-owned businesses. In addition, as we were starting the program, we also built some deep and strategic relationships with, I think, some NGOs that you may know today. We were an early member of NMSDC and a founding member of WeBank. Fast forward about 9 or 10 years after we started our program, we increased our commitment over time to 15% of our supply chain spend with diverse vendors, as well as we began our Tier 2 program. So many of you may call it a Tier 2 program or an indirect program, but we started that work early on in the program. And as time continued, I think, one thing that we can talk about or highlight is the fact that we started to really create the policies that govern our program today. And so I think policy creation, expectations are really important to start early, because they do become the foundation of your program. I know that when programs start, it's a little bit of a data collecting exercise, and that makes sense. But as quickly as you can start developing and implementing your processes and your policies, I think it becomes really helpful in operationalizing the work. And then in 2003, we actually added a key area of focus for us, which is supplier development. And so I think, as you can imagine, I think we're 32 years into this. We have evolved a lot, one being that we expanded our scope and recognized the diversity categories that I'm sure many of you recognize: disabled-owned, veteran-owned, LGBTQ+-owned. We've enhanced our tools. We've made a lot of investment of tools and analytics to help govern our program and to support our Tier 2 program capabilities. And I think, one thing, and it's interesting, we're a financial institution, and so we don't create widgets. We just buy a lot of products and services. And over the years, the world of supply chain has evolved and morphed when it comes to financial institutions. I mean, for a while, it was important that we, really thought about, cost reduction, centralizing a lot of products and services into vendors, larger vendors, vendor consolidation. So that was an era that really impacted how we looked at supplier diversity. And then I think we all remember the financial crisis of 2008. And out of that came a huge regulatory change when it came to not only how financial institutions operate, but how our supply chain operates. So that regulatory environment also changed the way that we sourced and the way that we looked at our supplier diversity program. And so it was really about understanding those industry shifts and being able to quickly pivot to meet those demands. And I think the other, key thing that we really had to pay attention to and grow as we grew, because over 30 years, you can imagine, we grew as a bank, and now we're a global company, but lots of acquisitions, a lot of consolidation, and really thinking about, as you grow the company and your purchasing dollars expand, then your supplier diversity program becomes much more, it becomes larger and much more complex to meet the complexity of the supply chain. So we've really worked on that. And to do that successfully, you gotta understand who your key stakeholders are to get the work done. In a smaller company where purchasing drives, a lot of the decision making around what you buy, it is much easier to establish policies and processes that just apply to the purchasing department. And as long as they follow those policies and processes, then okay, you'll be able to be very, very inclusive. But what happens is, as supply chains become more complex, so does your key stakeholder list. And so for us, we had centralized and decentralized supply chain, and we brought in category management. And so that world expands. And today, our lines of businesses are responsible for what they purchase. They are responsible for the vendor selection for what they choose to outsource. They are responsible for the vendor risks that they have in their portfolio. So they are key to the execution, not only of our program, but the success of our program. So really bringing in those key stakeholders at the right level is important. Now, when you think about key stakeholder engagement, you got to also think about, okay, what are the roles and responsibilities of those key stakeholders, and how am I going to hold them accountable, and what language do we speak? And for us, data is a common denominator, and data is the truth. So over time, we have spent a considerable amount of resources and time really being intentional about the data that we collect, the reporting that we provide, and the story. And that's an easy thing. That's not an easy thing to do, and it really does take a level of resources and being intentional to do that successfully, and then figuring out what pieces of reporting the story or types of data make sense across all of those key stakeholder groups. The other thing, when I think about where our program is today versus where we've evolved, has really been about the larger story and the importance of supplier diversity and the role that it plays within our company. For us, we see it as a strategic mandate. And so it's not just a purchasing program, it's not just one of those things that procurement does, but really, it's really how we deliver responsible growth. It's part of our ESG story. It's part of our DE&I story. So as your programs all grow and develop, as well as if they're mature today, it's really all about, I will continue to encourage folks to tie in the supplier diversity story to the enterprise story. I update our ESG committee, which is a committee that is chaired by our vice chair of the company, as well as our top leaders of the company attend, so that they clearly understand not only our program, but the benefits of our program. And I think the other thing that, was on the important spectrum to cover, and I know this is always a hot topic within the industry, is metrics, monitoring, all of those key things that it takes to run a program. And I guess there it's also a journey. And I mentioned earlier around the importance of establishing your policies and processes. And I think that what you decide to measure and monitor stems from your policy and processes. So once you establish those things, as well as the expectations from your program, and those things are well documented, you have the touch points in place, and all of the controls in place for your processes, then I think that those things result into clear outcomes. And when you have clear outcomes for your program, those outcomes become the levers for the things that you probably want to measure and monitor. So it really is adapting those change management types of disciplines and process disciplines that will help you understand the end result of what you want to measure and monitor. And then you build your monitoring plan. And so there's a number of metrics that we keep track of today, and we keep track of those metrics by line of business, by spend category, so we can slice and dice our data in many ways. Now, what we choose to report externally is our annual spend number, and you'll find that number in our annual report and so forth. And when you look across the industry, that's typically what corporates externally disclose, but internally, we definitely track our levers. And, I think it all starts, for me, it just, my thoughts, it starts with bid inclusion. Because the more that you can be inclusive in your bids of diverse vendors who can compete, the better chance you have for conversions. And for me and my team within Bank of America, our number one goal is to increase conversions. And those folks that, the diverse vendors that compete in bids, we want them to become vendors. So we have to start with the bids. Now, we also have a pretty developed way in which our third-party program is executed. And so there's a planning phase that our business partners take part in to really understand the strategy, their outsourcing strategy. And what we've begun to do over time is ensure that supplier diversity is part of those conversations and those strategic conversations. And so there's a clear understanding of our approach to diverse vendor inclusion before we even get to the bid. So the earlier that you can start thinking about diverse vendor inclusion, the better. And that's when you start to build out your list for inclusion. That's where you begin to search for your vendors and understand the key things that you're looking for in your vendor for wherever you're looking to include them in. So start early. And Juan Pablo, with that, I think I'll stop rambling now and just wait for any questions.
Oh, thank you so much, Vonshe, for your time, and definitely a great insight that we are hearing so far. So thanks again. And now we can go ahead with LaMecia. I'm going to stop sharing screen so you can share yours.
Okay, can everyone see the screen? Okay,
Perfect.
So excited again, as I said, to talk to you about Meta's Global Supplier Diversity Program. So we are by far relatively new compared to Vonshe's experience at Bank of America. Our program was started in 2016. And one of the things that I love about it is that it actually came about from some conversations with employees at Meta who saw what other companies were doing. They didn't work in procurement. And they said, this is what then Facebook should be doing. So they spearheaded the initiative to start supplier diversity at Meta, then Facebook. And then one of our colleagues who is still on our team at the time was searching and trying to determine like, where could she have impact in her career? And so she was actually the first supplier diversity employee. And then Jason Tremieux, who's our director of supplier diversity here at Meta, after he and I finished Super Bowl, then he joined the Facebook team to help lead the effort and the charge to officially launch the program. And I just use the word program, and I think it's important that we actually as a team try not to talk about our work as a program. We actually have the concept and the philosophy that we are trying to embed supplier diversity within our procurement process. And so if it is a part of the discipline of how people buy at Meta, because we are decentralized, which means any of our 70,000 plus employees can buy at any point in time and anything, how do we make sure that diverse suppliers are top of mind or in the funnel that they are looking at? And so there's a lot of things that we've done to try to transform how people are thinking about supplier diversity. We have a number of people who come from other companies where they've seen supplier diversity done, and the feedback that we receive is, okay, this is different from what I've seen. And so it kind of sits around three principles here where we care about the connections. So we are actively working to increase diverse supplier spend within Meta, where we call it also as in terms of growing their book of business. So we also think about not just the fact that these suppliers can do work for us, but we're trying to counsel, coach them. How do you think about growing your business beyond us? One of my favorite calls a couple of weeks ago was I had a supplier call me and say, we had a call from Google and they want us to work on some stuff, but like, can we do it? And I'm like, absolutely. Like, you better take the call. You better do the work. That's what this work is all about, is seeing their businesses grow. And then we also focus on connecting diverse suppliers to each other. So there are a couple of other slides that'll kind of get into that, but kind of this approach for our work is how we think about making sure that diverse suppliers have an opportunity, because as you know, Meta is all about connecting people to communities, our products, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, that's all about connection. And so we care about that as well for our diverse suppliers. Just to give you a concept of like our team, this is overwhelming. You may not start there. Guess what? We didn't start there either. So as I mentioned, we started with a team of one. Jason, who's at the top left, started, and that team of that first person is Tanika, who's the first left on the second row. Jason joined in 2015 as well. And then I joined in 2018. So if you can imagine 2015, 2016, 2018, and then I officially became full-time in 2019. And then the rest of this growth, you see Kim, who is next to me, she started in March 2020. She was our first pandemic hire. And everyone else has kind of grown there. The important part of this slide is that we are a global team. We just recently added our second full-time global person. So on our bottom row, these are our global partners. So Thais Silva sits in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and she is one of our sourcing specialists. So she focuses on LATAM, and she does so with the individual who's on the far right of this bottom slide. But then she also provides support to both EMEA and LATAM. Crystal Roberts is next to her. She is our full-time hire program manager in EMEA that just recently happened within the last 2 months. And then both Sylvia and Patricia, Sylvia is based in APAC, Patricia is based in LATAM, and these are volunteers, so to speak. So they have raised their hand and said, we care about supplier diversity enough that even though our full-time roles are sourcing managers, we will also work on supplier diversity. And they have been phenomenal partners in leading the charge for our global work. Across our team, you'll see a mix of data analysts, an operations analyst, and then we have dedicated individuals who focus on sourcing. So they are helping work directly with not only other sourcing managers at Meta, but then also the people who are responsible, business stakeholders who have budget, who are looking for suppliers. They are also managing those relationships. So it is a mix of things that everyone is doing. I didn't mention this, but my role is around external partnerships. And I like to call it, it's how we show up for Meta. So how do we show up externally as well as internally? So a lot of the work that I do is around marketing and comms. I manage a community of diverse suppliers for our team and all of our onboarded suppliers. I manage our Facebook, Instagram, et cetera. So if it's about Meta supplier diversity, it's probably coming across my desk is the best way that I tell people to think about it. So here's some key milestones just so you can understand. There's been rapid growth in the last 5 years, and our program is only 5 years old. October will make 6 years that our program has been in operation. So we launched at the NMSDC conference. You will soon be very familiar with the alphabet soup that is our certification partners. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, it's the National Minority Supplier Development Council. That's when we launched. It was a big coming out party, so to speak, for our team in talking about the efforts, because we really wanted to make sure that suppliers were aware that Facebook at the time had a supplier diversity program. How could you get connected? 2018, we published our first diverse supplier spend report. We really believe in transparency. And so similar to Vonshe and Bank of America, we actually published that information available. We just recently, within the last week, updated our website and put our 2021 numbers up. So if you went to our website, you'd be able to find them now. They are featured on a future slide too for reporting, but we feel that it's important. And actually, this was one of the reasons why I joined the team. When I heard the plan, and that was one of my primary projects, was to sit, analyze the data, make sure that we had accurate record keeping. And one of our principles is that we report the past with certainty. That's a finance principle at Meta. So we only report certified diverse supplier spend. And so that's very important to us that these suppliers have gone through the vetting process to validate that they are owned by one of the 5 categories of diversity that we recognize in the US, and then additional categories in global. Currently, we've only reported US spend, and so I'll talk a little bit more about that. But again, if we believe in the transparency, our data is even at the point where you can toggle and see year-over-year spend. And then as we thought about just how do we scale the efforts, if you can think about in 2019, we were still a team of 3. We really knew that, again, we needed to embed things within the culture of Meta. And so we launched an internal search tool that we built with Supplier IO, which was a diverse supplier. We took their Explorer program and we skinned it with Meta branding, and we inputted all of our onboarded diverse suppliers, all of our registered diverse suppliers, and then we also kept access to their suppliers within the Explorer tool that had previously registered with Supplier IO. And so this is an SSO enabled, a single sign-on enabled tool that Meta employees can log in, just click one button, they can log in, they can search for diverse suppliers, they can create lists, they can share lists, just putting it in the hands of the people who are the decision makers, because we can't answer every email. We don't get all the emails, we don't know, but we will at least help them have the tools to access the diverse suppliers. 2020, as we all know, was a big year, and a big conversation started to happen and grow even more about economic opportunities for underrepresented communities. And so this was a moment where Meta was looking at what they were doing, and they wanted to talk about their commitment to the Black community. This was June 2020, to be very specific. And so they came to us and said, like, what are we doing? And mind you, our team's been around, but what are we doing? So we said, hey, you know what? There's actually this goal that we have that in 2021, we want to spend $1 billion with diverse suppliers. This was a goal we had set for ourselves in 2018. We'd set annual targets, and we knew that based on how our spend was growing, that we wanted to spend $1 billion at the end of 2021. What a moment, because we had announced it previously. As you will find, some people don't always get the message the first time, but when it's public, then it changes. And so by us being able to be included in a statement by Maxine Williams, who's the head of diversity and inclusion here at Meta, that just accelerated the amount of champions, the amount of attention that our program received, and just what we were able to do. So that $1 billion goal was always our goal. I say that because I think it's important for suppliers and for other professionals to recognize there is the $1 billion roundtable. There are some incredible organizations who are in that. That wasn't our intention. We actually looked at it and said, we're a young program. How cool would it be to be one of the fastest growing programs to just reach $1 billion in spend with diverse suppliers? Like within 5 years, can we transform our spend that way? And so then to have it, elevated to the level where it's in a company announcement and a public announcement was really helpful. And then, we care about the suppliers, we care about the community. And so I actually had the opportunity to lead our inaugural virtual Diverse Supplier Summit. This was such a cool event. We continue to have additional summits. We're working on a global summit this year. And we had Magic Johnson as our keynote speaker. It's still available on our Facebook page if you want to watch it. I actually had someone tell me they watched it this week and they were like, it's still relevant, it's still engaging. I was like, wow, okay, thank you. And I'm glad it hasn't taken down. It's also fun. We have some music in there, we have DJs, et cetera, but it really just brings home the overall experience that we try to give to our suppliers, whether we're in person or virtually. How do we help them develop? How do we help them have conversations? How do we help them think about how they're presenting, not only to Meta, but to other people? And then in 2021, we launched our Tier 2 reporting. So we've been working with a key subset group of Meta Tier 1 suppliers who are providing in a certain amount of categories that we think we have the ability to continue to dig deeper and influence their spend with diverse suppliers. So that effort is expected to grow over this year. And then we did reach our goal, which was really exciting, that we did spend $1 billion, 1.26 billion, in fact, with US-based certified diverse suppliers, and then 306 million with Black-owned businesses. That effort did not come easy. We actually did have some people, again, who really stepped up as champions. Our contingent workforce experience team said, hey, we want to help with that Black-owned business goal. So they took a look because our contingent and contract staffing is usually owned and operated through a select group of staffing agencies. They said, hey, we don't have any Black-owned staffing agencies in this mix. How can we? They added 6 additional staffing agencies that were Black-owned to help contribute to that spend. So just working with different teams along the way has allowed us to continue to grow our spend year over year. And we see the difference in how people are reacting. And so that, I've walked you a little bit through the evolution, but I think, there were some key kind of shifts that we did. One, when we started, it really was about external. We were at the conferences, as this picture showed, and we showed up, as you can see. We have it. This is just like the morning crew, right, of who was there. But then we knew, and the pandemic also helped accelerate this. We knew we also needed to focus internally on those relationships. We did what we called road shows, where we were meeting with different teams in different sourcing categories and saying, okay, here's who are you working with? Who are those key suppliers? So we could learn about the incumbents and then try to find suppliers who, when those contracts were up for renewal, can you consider this supplier? Or, oh, you have a new need. Here's a supplier that's at that same scale. So it really was about building relationships. And then again, thinking about your team's capacity. If you're small, how do you embed them in tools, et cetera? One of the coolest things that I really appreciate is that in our contracts tool, it's able to see your suppliers that you're selecting. And if they're onboarded already, it'll tell you if they're diverse or not. So that tool is monitoring whether or not you've selected a diverse supplier. And if not, it'll say, hey, you haven't selected a diverse supplier. Would you like to for consideration for this contract? And so they may say yes. And it's like, oh, do you have the name? No. Okay. Then it routes them back to Diesel so that they can search for a supplier. And then we have a form if they need additional help. But then if they don't, then they have to fill out a question as to why they didn't select a diverse supplier. So using that information to give us feedback around the categories that where we don't see diverse supplier participation, do we have enough diverse suppliers? Why are those diverse suppliers who are there not getting selected? Those are feedback loops that we can then use, again, to build the pipeline. So there's a lot that you can do as your program evolves, but we weren't there yet. This is really quick. I think the thing that I'll highlight here is that there's internal reporting and dashboards for us have made the difference. My favorite day was when Kim started on our team. She's our data analyst, because prior to that, I was doing the data. And as I say, that's not my ministry. That's not what I signed up for. And so just her brain and how it worked and how she's been able to create leaderboards, allow people to even see within your purchasing history, here's what you're spending and here are diverse suppliers in that category that you could be using. And oh, by the way, here's your spend with diverse suppliers in this category compared to everyone else at Meta. So just giving people data points that allow them to help make decisions and making it very visible, accessible, has made a big difference internally. I think the other thing is, yes, we have these categories, but there's some other things that we're also monitoring in terms of how many of the suppliers are we using that we're working with year over year, and then also how many suppliers are making up with our top, 25% of our spend. So that gives us some health metrics in terms of our supplier diversity program and whether or not like supplier performance is on par and on target with what we want. And if we have the right distribution. And then this is just a screenshot. So again, if you go to our website, facebook.com/suppliers/diversity, you could sit and play and toggle with that information. And then just how do we engage with suppliers? So suppliers who register with us, onboarded suppliers, they're put in Diesel and they're able to have Meta employees search for them. We have a Facebook community group where we go live, we talk to them, we give them updates to our onboarded diverse suppliers about the program so that they can ask us questions. We host events. We've had a number of events where it's invite only or it's even open to the public, depending on what we do on our Facebook pages. And then we also have Supplier Spotlight. This is a program that's kind of in, it's like in phase 2 right now. So we started it in the pandemic where we could do on-demand meetings with suppliers. So anyone and everyone could sign up with 15 minutes for us. We're transitioning now where we want to focus more on category needs. And so we'll be adjusting the program where our sourcing managers tell us, here's the categories that we're focusing on for June. And then we allocate a certain number of slots so suppliers can meet with us. Because again, building that pipeline, keeping it going is really important. The other thing that I just want to talk about in terms of how we think about engaging suppliers, during the pandemic, we started Meta Invoice Fast Track. And so this is a program, like if you've heard of it, some people say, this sounds too good to be true. I'll tell you why they say that. So we were talking to our suppliers, and as I said, supplier conversations are really important for us. And they were telling us about the impact of the pandemic and how a lot of them didn't have access to the PPP loans. And so we started Invoice Fast Track as a way for, originally our onboarded diverse suppliers could sell us their non-Meta invoices and then for a 0.5% fee. And then they would be able to get their cash for their invoices and keep their businesses running. And then we've now since expanded it. The fee is now 1%. Meta doesn't see any of that money. We're just simply funding the money for repayment of invoices. It actually goes to our partners that you see on this screen, Supplier Success and Crowds, who run the back end of the program. But it really is, suppliers have invoices where people have net 60, net 90, net 120 payment terms we've seen. And so that is impacting the ability for suppliers to pay their employees, et cetera. We help with that. So if they are certified by one of our certification partners here in the US, they are immediately eligible to participate and have their sell their invoices to us, and then crowds and supplier success worries about the back end of getting that money back from those people who have paid or who owe that supplier money. So that's just one of the ways, again, that we really care about connecting with suppliers, meeting them at their needs. We do encourage certification, but it's not required. We're a global program. So this is a list of our supplier certification partners that we work with across the globe. Again, we encourage it, but we don't require it. We know it's dependent on each business and where they are in their life cycle. We also do have a program where for our suppliers who've met a certain threshold of spend each year, we actually offer the ability for them to work with a consultant and get certified. Again, we see the value in it because we know there are a number of our partners who only work with certified suppliers. And so we're just trying to encourage them to think about it. And we provide that service at no charge to the suppliers. So they get to work with this consultant, get certified, and then hopefully they see the benefit and continue to purchase and participate as a supplier that's certified. So very quickly, lessons learned, and I won't read all of these. I think very similar to Vonshe, find your champions, build those relationships, celebrate your champions, tell your supplier stories, and focus on the work. One of the things that you encounter in supplier diversity, and this is key for us, is a lot of people think supplier diversity and that equates small. And so we really try to think about that and make sure that we counter that narrative. We have some of the largest suppliers that are providing services for us. And so helping tell their stories to try to take away and demystify what supplier diversity really means. And then this is really important if you choose and you have a global program, building for GDPR compliance. So thinking about how you're housing, storing data, how you're collecting data is really important. And so if you build with that in mind, you may save some heartache, you may save some sleepless nights as we have had, just making sure that everything's aligned. So I think that is it in a nutshell for me. I put like our global supplier diversity Facebook and Instagram if you want to meet, or if you have any questions, you can email me directly later, but that's it.
LaMecia, thank you very much for your time and presentation. This is another extraordinary approach to this topic. Just to remind everyone, we're gonna take questions at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to leave your question on the chat. So thank you, LaMecia, again. Now we're gonna go ahead to our last panelist, Pa, with the city of Des Moines. Please, Pa, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'll try to go through this a little bit quickly so we have some time at the end there, but just a little bit about us and our background. I think this will help give you guys some context of where we're coming from. We're even newer than Meta. We're really just kind of in year 2 now, so we're really, really new to this. And we're in the government space too, so things take a lot longer to move than it does necessarily in the private sector. And so that's some aspects to keep in mind. But really ours started with us just wrestling with this question of how do we embed our values of social equity and sustainability into our procurement process. And a lot of that was stemming from the city council had passed a lot of resolutions over the last couple of years around social equity, sustainability. And so now we wanted to take that next step to say, okay, how do we really show that we are doing this work? And so my task was to think about it in the procurement world. And so we, this is the equity framework that the city council approved. But one of the first things that we did was we assembled the team of internal stakeholders. So there were about 3 or 4 of us who met weekly starting in January of 2021 to start talking through how do we make this really feasible in our procurement work? What can we start to do? And then a lot of this really just came from the recognition too that like as a city entity, like we are a really large economic engine with a unique authority as local government to support our community. And we spend a lot of money. We spend about 39% of our operating expenses on procurement. So that's about $250 million a year that we're going out the door. So we really wanted to be intentional about investing in our entire community and being really inclusive and who is a part of those opportunities, who knows about them, that sort of thing. And we also wanted to just start by signaling to our community that the city cares about these things. And so as a vendor, we want you to also care about these things. That was sort of one of our main messages we wanted to get out there. In May, we were selected as one of 7 cities to participate in the Open Contracting Partnership LIFT program, which is really it's an organization that helps accelerate procurement reforms in government and really making it open and transparent and user-friendly. So that's been really beneficial for us. So we've been doing this, we've been thinking about our plan and working on it. And this past May, one of the things that we decided to do, just to try something, just to try to move in the right direction, was to pilot these 2 questions that you see on your screen as part of every request for proposal that we put out there. So one is about sustainability and the other one is about social equity. Pretty broad questions when you look at these, not you know, I think that any company of any size could probably easily answer these questions. And then in our pilot phase, we included it as part of our evaluation process. So people were scored points based on how they responded to these. It was only 1 point in the pilot phase, but our goal is to increase that percentage to at least a minimum of 10 in our new ordinance piece. So stepping back a little bit, just to fit the supplier diversity piece into the bigger picture, when we looked at our procurement world in general, there were a couple issues, big issues that we saw in our operations. One was that we just had a lack of tools that were in place to help us implement our values. So they led us to do a lot of emergency purchases. So one, our policies and ordinances haven't been updated for a really long time. So we knew that was going to be part of this work. And secondly of all, if you've ever interacted with the city, you know we're heavily paper-based still. So we're in the process of modernizing, and actually through our partnership with OCP, we've been able to procure a e-procurement tool, and we will be rolling that out in the fall. So we'll be moving to electronic bidding in the fall. Some of you are probably in the private sector, but you know the public sector is very highly regulated in procurement. So we have a lot of kind of more restraints than I think the public sector does. And so this tool will allow us to be more transparent and to just make it easier for people so that they don't literally have to drive to City Hall and give us their bids. But another issue that we saw was that we just had a lack of market knowledge here at the city, to be really honest, and we weren't doing a ton of vendor outreach. Part of that was just the lack of staff capacity. We had an office of 3 people for a really big city. And so one of the things we've recently done is added 2 additional staff to that office, which has just increased our ability to do outreach. And then lastly, one of our issues was just that we lacked clear key performance indicators or metrics to really see if we're really even making a difference. I'll quickly go through these, but right now we're in the process of updating our ordinance. The first draft has gone before our city council, and what it includes is that local businesses get 1% of available scoring, and then vendors that can demonstrate their commitment to sustainability and social equity, so think back to those 2 questions, will have a total scoring of no less than 10% of the available ones. So we're allocating points to those 2 value areas. And then the state of Iowa also has the Targeted Small Business Procurement Act. They issue a certificate at no cost for businesses that are located in the state of Iowa. They're operating for profit. They make less than $4 million in gross income, and they're majority owned by one of those categories that you see on your screen there. And so there's a lot of benefit. We've really kind of tapped into this infrastructure that the state has already built out, and we are also going to be including similar rules to what the state has. So right now, if you are a TSB program, certified program at the state, you can you can obtain a contract with the state as long as it's below 25,000 without having to do the bidding process. You don't have to write a long proposal about what you can provide and so forth and compete for that. They can just directly source it from you. So we plan to replicate that here at the city. I think this is a really important strategy, and it really aligns a lot with kind of the WMBE allocation things. It's kind of in the same boat. And then one of the other things that the state does is they allow these TSB businesses to have access to these opportunities in advance of it being made public to the general public. So also giving these companies an advantage there. Procurement metrics is something that I am personally very passionate about because I also run performance measurements at the city. But one of the things that we've come to realize is that we need to really just identify different categories of what are we really looking for and the specific metrics for it, because we have this kind of unique opportunity to move to an e-procurement system now. We have acquired a software where we know we can design the fields to pull these data sets that we have. So it's going to become an automation piece, and I'm really thrilled about that, excited about that. Outreach strategies, ours is really going to take place over this next summer. As we roll out our new e-procurement system, we're going to tie it to that, but we'll be doing mailers to existing vendors and bidders. We're going to be connecting with our partners like the partnership and others to really get the word out about who we're looking to do business with and how do you get informed about the city process. We're going to be placing ads, digital ads. Cirrus is a company based out of the state of Iowa that does these meet the buyer events where they bring vendors and buyers to one gathering. You get to kind of just talk about how does this work. And so that's been a cool event that we've participated in. And then we'll also be holding standard office hours for vendors to come into City Hall to get help with their bids and so forth. Some recommendations or advice: start small. We started small. We just needed to make it really feasible, celebrate those small wins. One of the things we've done is ask for regular feedback from internal and external stakeholders. We're thinking really broadly about supplier diversity, and I think that's helped us. So not only are we targeting women and minority-owned businesses, but if you aren't one of those things, we want to know what you are doing to uplift those communities. That's really the purpose of those questions. And then supplier development, this is a piece that we're still working through, but we want to be able to help those vendors who come to us who say, hey, we're not really doing much on this front yet, but what can you do to help us? And so we're going to be possibly looking for some partners to be able to help those vendors build out what they have. So that's what I have, and that's my contact information if you guys have any other questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all our panelists for your time and presentations today. Such an extraordinary insight that you are leaving us today, and they're all different approach, but equally important when it's about to implement an effective supplier diversity program. So thank you all. And now I'm going to head it over to Meg so she can help us on the Q&A part.
Yeah, thank you. And Jeff, I may just ask you to unmute and talk about your question, and we can have a little bit of dialogue around that supplier opportunity model that you mentioned.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, LaMecia, first off, thank you, great job. And I'm impressed with what you've done for the community down there in Houston in recovery from the hurricane as well as the Super Bowl. And yes, it is a Houstonian accent right here. So, yeah. So my perspective is we already rolled out the supplier IO diversity plan. We do have feedback and we have reports and metrics. And those are all really good points, and we do use them. So I would encourage anyone that's still developing it to follow up in that way. We have problems with having awareness in the community that these things exist, right? And if it's supplier.io or the one that you mentioned, and I'm hopeful that on some level in the community, the local community or central Iowa, that something could be developed. And you mentioned the Facebook posting. I'd hate to think that 40 different companies within the area would have to post up a Facebook. You work for Meta, so it's a little different. But if there's more of a centralized effort that's ongoing for this, because we've done these conferences and these workshops for a while now. Is there any initiative to have like a job board, a supplier board? I know that there's a fair coming up still, but I love the Facebook idea. So is there anything like to message to the diverse communities that these things are legit, they're real, here's part of what the objective is, and just make them feel more at ease with it? Because I've had a lot of cold calls, and I'm an engineer, not a salesperson, so I do okay. I've had a lot of cold calls where I have to even explain the concept, and I was wondering if there's any detail around that.
If any of our panelists have some experience in this space, I'd welcome it. I think locally we're still a little bit disconnected. So we have a lot of organizations doing a lot of good work to make sure that we are better aware of the small businesses in our region and better able to reach out to them and connect with them and build trust with them, and explain those opportunities for engagement and kind of cultivate them along that pipeline. We also have locally meet the buyers types of programs. I think we're aiming for June for our next one of those. So an opportunity for them to hear from all of you on the corporate side about the processes and build some awareness in that regard. And then we're also just listening behind the scenes to some of their pain points for doing business with some of our corporations, and figuring out how we can play a supporting role in having them have the confidence to sign on to a big contract, which could be tremendous, but maybe a little intimidating as they're signing their name on that line. So certainly some more opportunities. I do think, honestly, I actually looked up when you dropped that note in the chat, there isn't a local Facebook group, I don't think, that addresses this. So that seems like an easy win that we could probably start pulling together right away. So thanks for that.
No, thank you for that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and beyond that, I think we'll just continue to host the sessions and tell the stories. And Jeff, I think you guys have done a lot since we were together last August. So we'd love to share that story. And I think, Pa, as you guys are getting ready to talk about your efforts more publicly in fall, we'd love to help share that story too, and just hold up those opportunities to our local businesses as well. So keep us posted. We're actually at time, so I want to honor that, but are there any other questions that you have while we have these talented ladies with us here? Okay. Super. I will then close this out and just thank you for your time. We do have a number of other programs again on deck coming up in a few weeks. A lot of them focus on talent. That's everyone's #1 pain point here. So we've got some interesting sessions along that line, but you can find more information about that at dsmpartnership.com/events. So for now, thank you. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon and keep doing the good work that you're doing. Makes a huge difference.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.